Content warning. This video discusses a brutal mass murder including the deaths of children. Viewer discretion is advised. An entire family was brutally murdered on their farm. Then the killer stayed in the house for days, feeding the animals and eating their food. This is the Hinterkaifeck massacre, March 31st, 1922. A remote farmstead in Bavaria, Germany. 6 people were murdered with a mattock, a farming tool similar to a pickaxe. The killings were brutal, methodical, and terrifying. But here's what makes this case truly disturbing. After the murders, someone stayed in the house for days. They fed the livestock. They ate meals in the kitchen. They lit fires in the fireplace. Neighbors saw smoke coming from the chimney. Whoever killed the Gruber family didn't just murder them and leave. They lived with the bodies. Over 100 years later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain unsolved, and the evidence is absolutely chilling. The Gruber family lived on an isolated farm called Hinterkaifeck, about 70 kilometers north of Munich. The family consisted of Andreas Gruber, 63, the patriarch, Cäzilia Gruber, 72, his wife, Victoria Gabriel, 35, their widowed daughter, Cäzilia Gabriel, 7, Victoria's daughter, Joseph Gabriel, 2, Victoria's son, Maria Baumgartner, 44, the family's new maid. The farm was remote. The nearest neighbors were far enough away that screams wouldn't be heard. And in the days before the murders, Andreas Gruber noticed something strange, something that would haunt investigators for over a century. 6 months before the murders, the family's previous maid quit abruptly. She claimed the house was haunted. She heard footsteps in the attic when no one was. Up there, she heard strange noises at night. The family dismissed her claims and hired a new maid, Maria Baumgartner. She arrived on March 31st, 1922. She would be dead within hours, but Andreas Gruber had started noticing things too. A few days before the murders, he found footprints in the snow leading from the forest to the house. But there were no footprints leading back. Someone had walked to the farm and never left. He found a strange newspaper in the house that no one in the family had bought. He heard footsteps in the attic, just like the maid had said. He told neighbors about it, but he didn't report it to police. Maybe he thought it was nothing, or maybe he knew who it was and didn't want to involve authorities. On March 31st, 1922, someone decided it was time. The killer struck in the evening. For members of the family, Andreas, Cäzilia, Victoria, and little Cäzilia, 7, were lured one by one into the barn. As each person entered, they were struck from behind with a mattock. Brutal blows to the head. The weapon was found at the scene later. The victims were stacked on top of each other in the barn. Some were still alive after the attack, struggling and pulling out their own hair in agony before they died. Then the killer went into the house. The 2 youngest, Joseph, 2, and the new maid Maria, were killed in their beds. Maria's skull was shattered. Little Joseph, just 2 years old, was struck so hard the impact split his face. 6 people murdered within hours. And then the killer stayed. Mail was collected from the mailbox. Neighbors even reported seeing someone moving around inside the house, but no one thought to check on the family. The farm was isolated. The Grubers kept to themselves. It wasn't until April 4th, 4 days later, that neighbors finally came to investigate. The little girl, Cäzilia, hadn't shown up to school. What they found was a scene of unimaginable horror. Police arrived to find 6 bodies. The crime scene was gruesome. The killer had carefully covered the bodies in the barn with hay and straw. The murders in the house showed signs of planning. This wasn't random rage. It was calculated. But the most disturbing detail? Someone had been living there after the murders. Food had been prepared and eaten. Fires had been lit. Animals had been fed. The killer had stayed in the house with 6 corpses for days. Why? No one knows. Police had over 100 suspects. They interrogated neighbors, family members, and even traveling workers. One theory: Victoria's husband, Karl Gabriel, was officially declared dead in World War I, but his body was never found. Some believed he had deserted, returned home, and murdered the family. Another theory: Andreas Gruber had an incestuous relationship with his daughter Victoria. The youngest child, Joseph, might have been Andreas's son, not Victoria's late husband's. Someone might have killed the family out of disgust. A third theory: a local man named Lorenz Schlittenbauer was obsessed with Victoria and may have been Joseph's real father. He was one of the first people at the crime scene and acted suspiciously, touching bodies and rearranging items. A fourth theory: a drifter or vagrant had been hiding on the property for weeks, explaining the footprints and attic noises, and killed the family to take over the farm temporarily. Despite all the theories and over 100 interrogations, No one was ever charged. The case went cold. The bodies were buried. But the mystery didn't end. In 1923, police exhumed the bodies and removed the victims' heads. They sent the skulls to Munich for forensic analysis, a cutting-edge technique at the time called facial reconstruction. The heads were never returned. They were lost during World War II and have never been found. The Hinterkaifeck farm was considered cursed. No one would live there. It was eventually torn down in 1923, just 1 year after the murders. Today, nothing remains of the farm except an empty field and a small memorial stone. But the questions remain. Who killed the Gruber family? And why did they stay in the house with the bodies? Over 100 years later, the Hinterkaifeck murders remain one of Germany's most infamous unsolved cases. The killer was never caught. The motive was never confirmed. And the chilling detail that someone lived in the house for days after committing mass murder has never been explained. Modern investigators have revisited the case using new technology, but the lack of physical evidence and the missing skulls make it nearly impossible to solve now. Somewhere in history, someone got away with one of the most disturbing crimes ever committed. What do you think happened at Hinterkaifeck? Was it Victoria's supposedly dead husband, a jealous lover, a drifter hiding in the attic, or someone else entirely? Drop your theory in the comments. And if you want more unsolved true crime mysteries, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. And remember, some killers are never caught.